Howdy, how we going today, guys? It's Mickey Sticks here from Alive Like a Suicide. Now, I have a bit of a special video for you guys today. It's not an album review, it's not a vlog, it's not anything like that. It's actually a bit of a viewer's request video. Now, don't know if you've noticed, but in a couple of the videos that I uploaded in the past, I uploaded some cassette tape transfer videos. Now, the purpose of that was literally just to show people what cassette tapes sounded like. Now, a lot of people were surprised in how they sounded and were actually wanted the links to it and all that sort of stuff. Unfortunately, I can't really supply the links to that music because obviously I don't own the rights to it. I wanted to upload the rest of my cassette tape collection as well, so that obviously everyone can hear what music sounded like back then, especially off cassette tape. It's not too different to what Spotify sounds like, believe it or not, but we'll get to that later, right? So yeah, I was trying to upload all of those videos and YouTube has gone and blocked a lot of them, and honestly I understand that. So due to that, I can't upload any more of my cassette tape collection to let you guys hear what's going on with cassette tapes and how they sound and all that sort of stuff. But I thought of something that was actually probably the next best option. I had a comment asking how do I record my cassettes off my Tascam Portastudio 3. Now, that was a very, very interesting comment. I did explain the process of it, but I thought making a video might be a bit better, and it gives me an excuse to talk about cassette tapes. It gives me an excuse to study them. It gives me an excuse to teach you guys about cassette tapes, the different types, the different formulations, how to record on them, and the sounds that you get off them. Now, what I'll be using today is my Tascam Portastudio 3. It is a 4-track cassette tape recorder, and I believe it's from the late 80s, if I'm not mistaken. Late 80s, early to mid 90s. Around that time, so like 89 to like 95, around that era, right? So Tascam still makes these sorts of things today. They make a digital version of them, obviously, and you can still pick them up for a couple $100. I picked mine up maybe in around about 2019. This is like pre-COVID era, so I picked mine up off eBay, refurbished, new belts, heads cleaned, all that sort of stuff, for about $250. That was not including shipping, so I think shipping altogether it came to about maybe $320. But yeah, it's quite a versatile unit. I've recorded a few of my bands and stuff back in the days, in the early days before I learned how to record in the box on a DAW digitally. I was recording like this onto cassette tape, just chucking microphones in front of a drum kit and running it straight to the cassette tape. So what we've been doing today is a bit different. For an example of showing you how cassettes work and all that sort of stuff, I've gone ahead and I've recorded 10 Beatles songs, because we need a bit of music for this, don't we? We need some songs, and I do have original music of my own. If you've listened to my album, you'll obviously know, and the new single's out now. Go check out So Fun. We've got another single coming out soon, so stay tuned for that. But I thought we'd go a different route with that as well, and we'd record some covers today. I've gone ahead and recorded 10 Beatles covers, slaved away at it. It was, I'll tell you what, it was a task where, like, in my head, when I first took it on, I thought it was going to be easy. You know, I thought, yeah, Beatles songs, like, you know, easy. We'll do 10 of them for the video and crank it out. Won't take me long. It took me longer than I thought it would. Honestly, it took me longer than I thought it would. It was to the point where I was starting to sort of question myself as a musician, and sort of question why I put myself through this, right? Because I chose to put myself through this. So come for me with this journey about cassette tapes, about a Tascam Portastudio 3, about a Mickey and his guitar. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoy the video. I hope you guys enjoy the ride. So let's start off with a bit of history and a bit of context to what a cassette tape actually is, where it came from, and obviously how it works. So we wouldn't really have cassettes if we didn't have the Second World War, and we've got a lot of things on Earth to thank the Second World War, ironically, for. Cassettes is one of them. Now, we had magnetic recording technology before cassette tapes, but the actual tape sort of system itself was invented in the Second World War. The machine that the Beatles used to record their first two albums on was called a BTR-2. It's a British tape recorder. That dates all the way back to like 1940, between 1940 and 1945, right? So this is sort of the era when it was invented. It was reel to reel. It was not what you would think about today, right? It was these two massive reels, like you would think in a recording studio, right? You'd have these two massive reels and some 2-inch tape, I believe it was, and it would work like a normal cassette tape would, but just a giant version of it on reels, and it's not in a shell, right? So the cassette tape, as we know it, didn't really come around until the 60s. Now, up until then, we had like a few different competitors like RCA and a few other companies making their own version of what they thought a cassette tape should be, but the standard of a cassette tape sort of came around, around about 1964 when Philips came out with their compact cassette that had 2 spools, right? It was a shell, 2 spools, and that's basically what we know as a cassette today. Now, I have an example of an early cassette tape, pre-recorded one. It's obviously a Beatles one to fit the theme and fit the mood. But this is what they would have looked like back then. When you would have bought cassette tapes, this is what they would have looked like, right? It's a bit, I've got the light there, so it might be hard to see. Might be a bit easier there. But that's what they would have came in, and that's how you know it's original. Someone's put a spine there themselves. And yeah, the track listing is obviously very different because I think it's got something to do with tape length or whatever, but this is what they would have looked like when pre-recorded cassettes were first released. Now, the sound quality for these tapes, if you want to start collecting old Beatles cassette tapes, like originals like these, don't be expecting anything that's high fidelity, right? These were not transferred the best. As you can see, this is actually, I have this fully spooled right to the end, and I don't know if you can see that, but see how short that leader is, right? That's all the leader you get, and then there's the tape, right? The leader is the length of plastic before the actual tape itself. And usually the tape has about, 3 or 4 revolutions of leader before it actually comes to the actual cassette tape there. So that's how short the leader is. So this is before we had proper standards for leaders and all that sort of stuff, but we had a standard for what a cassette should be. So that's what you would have got back in the day if you had cassettes, and to be quite honest with you, they sound horrible. There's no treble, the bass is very, very muddy, it's a lot of mid-range, but it's just not a clear listen. I have these because I like collecting, but they're not really for listening. Because they're so old too, there is a risk to playing them, shedding, all that sort of stuff. So yeah, that's what you would have got back in the days. Then we move to an original tape from 1979. Now this is something that you can actually go and watch on my channel right now. This one didn't get blocked. This is Michael Jackson's Off the Wall. So this is about nearly 10 years later from that Beatles cassette that we just seen. And as you can see, we've got leader, and it's a nice clean cassette tape design. It doesn't look like it's just been thrown together. There's been some care that's been put into putting this cassette together, and to be honest, it sounds great, even though it's from 1979. This tape is over 50 years old. Oh, 50 years old? 40 years old. Sorry, this tape's over 40 years old, I believe. So it still sounds great today, and you can hear the evidence on my YouTube channel. I'll put the link down below. Hopefully it doesn't get blocked. But moving 10 years ahead from that, pretty much towards where the peak of cassettes were at the time, we're going to 1990, and this is what you would have got if you're buying cassettes. It's very high quality, right? I highly recommend collecting cassettes from this era. This is an In Excess record, X. Personally, it's my second favorite album. And yeah, that's what you got. Fully official, nice printing, easily readable, long leader, clear case. And you got pretty much everything you got with the CD and the vinyl at the time. You got all of the album information and photos and all that sort of stuff, but it was crammed into this tiny little cassette shell, which I think is awesome, and probably the biggest appeal of cassette tapes. It's awesome, this little compact design. Compact cassettes. Now moving forward 9 years from that record, we're going towards a bit of the downturn of cassettes now, where, you know, we're in the era of CDs and also Napster, downloading and all that sort of stuff, pirating music. Music went digital in 1999, 2000, 2001, 2002. But we have a great example of a record released new on cassette in 1999, and that's Red Hot Chili Peppers' Californication. But this is not a Western copy. This is not from the USA, Australia, Canada, the UK. This is not a Western copy. This is an Indonesian copy, I believe. As you can see at the top here, I don't know if it'll focus, but this is like a little Indonesian barcode, right? They were still very popular in those sorts of areas. Indonesia, I believe, in places like Russia and stuff like that too. Eastern Europe, cassette tapes were still very, very popular. Because in terms of like music formats and stuff like that, those sorts of areas have always been a little bit behind the times in terms of the formats that they're still listening to their music on. Where we're listening to stuff streaming, they're still probably listening to stuff on CDs and maybe even recording onto cassettes, because you can still get new cassettes from there. So that's a great example. That's what you would get in 1999, right? Still very much the same as what you would get in 1990, and the same stuff that you would get with the CD and the vinyl inside the cassette, just in a small version. It's awesome. Now we're moving ahead in time, about 7 years from that record. We got another Chili Peppers example here. Stadium Arcadium on cassette tape. Yes, I know, for Chili Peppers fans too, you guys will be surprised as hell just to see this on a single cassette. This is a double album on one cassette, guys. I honestly, I can't believe they crammed it all into here too. This is on 2 CDs. 2 CDs and I think 4 vinyl records on cassette. Whole album, double album, 1 cassette. That's what I mean, the power of cassette tapes. This will fit in your pocket, double album. Fit in your pocket right next to your Walkman. And in 2006, this is an official Warner Brothers pressing. Pretty much brand new, because I've only played this cassette personally once, just to hear it and all that sort of stuff. It's a very long album to sit through. And as you can see, it's a very, very big tape, right? This is probably one of the largest tapes I own in terms of length. But we've got another Indonesian copy here, I believe, right? And still, in 2006, it was high quality. It was what you got exactly with the CD. I've got multiple copies with this album, and I can tell you now, it's exactly what you would have got, right? And just as small as all the other ones, just as cool, just as high quality, right? It's even got the little Warner Brothers logo on the shell there, so it's an official pressing. It's not a bootleg. This album was pressed on cassette in 2006. Think about that. 2006, in the Western world, we had iTunes was just coming into the fray, and this album had a lot to do with launching iTunes. I know that for a fact. It had a couple of singles and stuff that were iTunes exclusive. I believe it was I think it was a song called Body of Water, and whatever the B-side to Danny California was, they were purchasable through iTunes, and there are a few other Rare Chili Pepper songs that launched along with iTunes, along with this album. So, yeah, same year that iTunes was being launched and sort of becoming a thing, and we were running around with iPods and MP3 players, you could still get this album on cassette tape in Indonesia, and probably other countries like India and, like I said, Eastern Europe and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, just because we didn't buy them or we had something else didn't mean that the majority of the world wasn't still buying cassettes. Now, from that album, we actually have a fair leap in time. We're moving to quite a modern era now, and we're moving to 2022 now, about 2 years ago from now, and I actually did an album review for this record. This is another Red Hot Chili Peppers album. This is the Unlimited Love cassette, right? This is also an official pressing, a Warner Brothers record pressing, but the thing is with cassettes these days, especially pre-recorded cassettes, is don't really expect the quality of the Stadium Arcadium one that I just showed you. Even though that's a 2006, the quality is amazing, right? This is a bit more DIY. I like to say it's a bit more DIY. By this era, a lot of the cassette pressing plants have closed down. The major ones anyway, the ones that pressed these amazing high quality cassettes, they don't really exist anymore, right? And a lot of the record labels back in the days, they sold them off, right? Sold them off, closed them down, all that sort of stuff, focused on CDs, and then eventually digital came and ruined everything. So these are more of like a novelty now. Sound quality wise too, they're okay, you know, they're okay. If you bought a good cassette deck and you listen to one of these, you would probably get the best out of them. But cheap cassette decks with cheap tapes aren't really the best thing. So this is what I would consider to be a cheap tape, right? It's made by a duplication facility that anyone can contact and print their cassettes from. Even though it's a Warner Brothers pressing, it's still a generic cassette with generic oxide tape, generic leader, generic everything. Back in the days, the formulation was a little bit more specific, a little bit more formulated. Now it's just all one formulation of cassette and everyone gets the same thing. That's okay, but also it's a sad thing because not many people can get the best out of a cassette if it's all the same. So just because the cassette's a little bit cheap doesn't mean you don't get the same sort of stuff that you got with the CD and the vinyl. Even in 2022, they did great with the packaging and all that sort of stuff. This clamshell is a little bit thinner and flimsier than the old ones used to be. The old ones are honestly bulletproof, but for 2022, still being able to buy a new album on cassette tape in the Western world these days, and this is a Western pressing, this is an Australian pressing, they've come back, is amazing, right? So that's a little bit of an example of what cassettes look like, all that sort of stuff, how they have evolved over the years, and what they can do, and yeah, pretty much their function, their visual image, what you got in the package, all that sort of crap. So yeah, now we will move on to the next process, and I'll be showing you some blank cassette tapes of what we're going to be recording with the Tascam Portastudio 3 today. So we'll get to that in a second. See you guys there. Alright, so here are the cassette tapes that we're going to be using today for this test, and to basically show you how cassette tapes work. We've got two different formulations of cassette tape here that we'll be working with, and we'll be working with some new old stock cassette tapes that I have. They're still pretty easy and semi-cheap to find on eBay. It depends on the formulation you're looking at. So this formulation I'm about to show you right now is the cheapest formulation that you can still find, and it was the most common that you could find back in the day. If you went into the supermarket or, you know, the electronics store to pick up some cassettes, most likely this was the type that you were picking up. This is a type 1 cassette tape. I've got some TDK D120 cassette tapes right here. This is type 1, normal position. I believe it's normal bias or whatever it says here. High output, low noise, dynamic cassette, normal bias. All right, and I believe if you're wondering about this number up here, it's like 120 US EQ. I believe 120 might be referring to how thick the plastic actually is and the oxide. It's got something to do with the formulation. So yeah, that's what they would have looked like, brand new, out of the box. Still have a box of them. This is the type 1 cassette tape, and 120 is the runtime, so it's 120 minutes. That's not 120 minutes A and B, right? That's 120 minutes A to B. So it will run, what's half of 120? It's 60. So side A of this cassette tape will be 60 minutes, and then it'll stop, and then you'll flip it over, or if it's got an auto reverse, it'll do it automatically, and it'll play side B, which will be another 60 minutes. So it's great for making mixtapes, it's great for making, you know, albums, all that sort of stuff. But in terms of using it in my Tascam, it is a bit difficult because my Tascam only likes max 90-minute tapes, and it actually says it in the manual of this Tascam, which I will show you later on in this video. It says C90 max, which basically means 90-minute cassette tape. When you put this into the Tascam, it'll record fine. It might record a bit slow, just because it's a heavy cassette and it's got a lot to move in here, and maybe the motor is calibrated for certain weights and all that sort of stuff, so it can be accurate. It's more of a recording machine than it is a playback machine. So I didn't personally have much problems myself recording, but when it came to rewinding and fast forwarding this tape, I actually had to do it by hand. Now, for most people, right, doing it by hand might be a bit of an arduous task. It might take a while. It might, you know, be a bit of a pain in the ass. I'll show you guys a little bit of a trick here, right? So if you have a tape that you haven't been able to wind back, what you want to do, grab yourself a pen, all right? You grab yourself a pen, and then you grab yourself that unwindable cassette tape. I've got another D120 here as an example, right? You stick the pen on the end of that cassette tape, and you make sure you're spinning it in the right direction, right? So it'll help if I actually stuck it in the end that doesn't have any tape on it, right? You make sure the tape is obviously traveling in the right direction, and then you just start spinning it in this direction. You spin it as fast or as slow as you want. The faster the better, but this is how you wind a tricky cassette tape, or a cassette tape that you feel like might get chewed or something like that during the rewind process in the cassette deck. So that's how we wind by hand, and as you can see, we've got more tape on that spool now, and it's the same process to wind it back. You just stick it on the other side and you start winding it in the opposite direction. All right, like righty-tighty, lefty-loosey, all that sort of stuff. So anyway, that's the little trick on how to wind cassettes and all that sort of stuff, and that is a type 1 cassette tape, right? They look very similar, right? The other cassette tape I'm about to show you looks almost exactly the same. We will get to the differences in a minute. So the cassette tape that I've got here is a Sony UX 60-minute cassette tape, and this is a type 2 cassette tape. It's chromium dioxide. Now, these types of cassettes are my preferred cassettes to record on. And if I can track down pre-recorded cassettes that are chrome, they're always worth a little bit more, simply because it's a better formulation of tape. It's more highly sought after. It's slightly more rare than your Type 1 cassettes. These are less common to find, and if you want to get blank new old stock ones of these, they do run a little bit more of a price, especially for the higher quality options. Now, this UX option from Sony, it's a Sony formulation, and that was always a high quality formulation of cassette tape. But this UX formula here is probably the lowest formula before you go to the Sony CD-IT range of formulation of tape. This is like your standard range of high fidelity cassette tape. Then you've got the UX-X, which is your mid-range. Then you've got the UX Pro, which is your professional range, and the UX Master, which obviously would be used in like studios and stuff like that for testing masters and all that stuff of albums and all that sort of stuff. A pro cassette might be used by a musician, a professional musician who's recording demos and stuff like that, that could potentially be used on an album. It's still a very high quality cassette, but the master is the highest quality of that range. Now, that's what the back looks like. Sort of shows you like a frequency response and all that sort of stuff, and we'll get to those in a minute. I'll explain all that sort of stuff, the different type of frequency responses of each tape and all that sort of stuff. If I get my terminology wrong, or if I'm saying something wrong, like it's not frequency response, deal with it, all right? At least I'm talking about the right thing. It might not be the right terminology, but it's the right thing. So yeah, this is the Sony UX 60-minute cassette tape. This is a high bias cassette, type 2, and you can see chromium dioxide there, or it's CrO2. It's the periodic table name for it, and it'll say high bias 70 US. Now, my cassette deck, this Tascam here, is specifically made for this type of cassette, type 2 chromium cassette tapes. Its bias is set for that, to record onto these. Bias, I believe, is like the energy that is required to put a signal onto tape, right? So I've got quite a high bias machine for high bias tapes. Now, for me, I haven't really had too many problems recording type 1 using this cassette tape, using this cassette deck, even though it is a high bias cassette deck. I haven't had too many problems with it. Honestly, haven't gone through too many issues. It's not really a problem. So as long as you've got your levels going in right and you're not pushing the type 1 tape too hard, it records all right. But this is the best and the highest fidelity and my preferred option of cassette tape, and it's the more expensive. So now we'll get to the differences between these two cassette tapes and their formulations. What makes this type 1? What makes this type 2? I'm sure you want to know. So, type 1 or IEC1 ferric or normal cassettes were historically the first cassettes and the most common and least expensive. They dominated the pre-recorded cassette market. Now, I'm not going to really get into the specifics too much of the science and the formulation and all that sort of stuff, but for simple terms, their formulation is iron dioxide. Right, they're iron tapes. That's why they're brown. It gives it that sort of hue. It's the same reason why Australia is the colour that it is. It's because of the soil. It's full of iron. Right? It's that rusty colour. Type 1 tapes must be recorded with normal low bias flux and replayed with a 120 US time constant. Over time, ferric oxide technology developed continuously, with superior generations emerging around every 5 years. So that explains why there was a difference of quality between the Beatles tape and the Michael Jackson tape. A quite drastic difference of quality. Because yeah, around every 5 years the tape formulations improved and the sound quality improved very much for type 1 cassettes. Again, because it was the standard, it was the pre-recorded standard, it was what you would have bought if you would have bought your favorite albums on cassette tape. It most likely would have come on type 1. Type 2 didn't really come around pre-recorded until CDs come around and the tapes had to combat with the fidelity of a CD. So Type 2 came around as a fidelity option for copying CDs and copying, you know, everything else. Usually when you do find a cheaper Type 2 cassette tape, it'll say like 4CD or something like that. Even the higher end Type 1 cassettes, like this TDK, right here, see that CD on a cassette tape? It's intended for CD, or at least that's what it's marketed for, duplications of CDs and digital files. It's meant to be high quality. Now we move to Type 2 cassette tapes. IEC Type 2 cassette tapes are used for recording using a high bias and replay of 70 US time constant. Type 2 cassette has been historically known as a chromium dioxide tape, or simply a chrome tape. But in reality, most Type 2 cassette tapes do not contain chromium. A true chrome tape might have an old crayon smell or a waxy sort of smell. All kinds of Type 2 tapes on average have a higher frequency mole and sol, MOL and SOL, and a higher signal to noise ratio than quality Type 1 cassette tapes. Now, essentially what that means is it's like tape hiss, it's like your noise floor. It's essentially like, so how much signal you've got on the tape, how much noise is on top of that. So like how much tape hiss and all that sort of stuff. This is caused by the mid-range and treble pre-emphasis applied during recording to match the 70 US equalization at playback. So the major difference really between Type 1 and Type 2 is their frequency response. How they accept frequency onto the tape and how it plays back. So a Type 1 sort of has a better low range response, right? It can fit more low range information on there and it has a better saturation for the low range. But when it comes to the treble, it sort of rolls off at the top. It rolls off at around, I think it's like between 12 and 13,000 hertz. That's where there's a high shelf roll off. Right, so if you're mastering a track for cassette, Type 1 cassette, you're most likely gonna wanna, to the master or to the mix bus, apply an EQ to it, boosting those treble frequencies so you can get more of those out of the tape. They are there and you can get a lot out of that tape. It's not the end of the world, because in reality, I'll tell you this now, that's what Spotify cuts off too. So if you listen to Spotify, it cuts off its frequency around 15K. Google it. Around 15K. Honestly, Google it. And Spotify is not the highest quality you can listen to your music on. You can go and listen to your music on Tidal. That's the highest quality you can stream digital files on. But Spotify, it's no better than listening to MP3s. It's no better than listening to, you know, a cassette tape, really. So that's Type 1. Type 2 has a bit more of a roll-off on the low end and it has a much better treble response. So if you're mastering for Chrome Type 2, you don't necessarily need to boost the treble as much on a Type 1 cassette master. With the Type 2 cassettes, you really have to boost the bass a little bit more. Boost the bass and leave the treble and you'll get more of an even master. You'll also get a really, really good reproduction of the sound that you recorded onto a Type 2. Obviously, because it's a higher quality formulation of cassette, right? So it's made for recording, it's made for demos, it's made for, you know, musicians and all that sort of stuff. And you can still find pre-recorded cassettes that are Type 2 chromium dioxide. They're rarer to come by though. They're much rarer to come by. I've got albums, I've got the same album. One is Type 1, one is Type 2. And the Type 2 one was much more expensive to track down than the Type 1. So those are the differences between the cassette tape types and their response and all that sort of stuff. You get a beautiful sound from both of them. It depends on what you're after, really. It depends on what you like and what you're after and the sound that you're sort of going for, whether you go for Type 1 or you go for Type 2. Now, in this test, we've got two tapes that we're going to be working with. We've got obviously our type 1 here, and we've got our type 2. Now, like I said, I'm going to be recording a digital mix of the 10 tracks that I recorded, the Beatles EP, let's call it that for lack of a better term, onto both of these tapes. Mind you, they're not a master, right? I'm doing the cassette tape as like a middleman, right? So I've mixed it digitally, I've recorded everything digitally, right, with my Scarlett Focusrite. I've recorded bass, guitar, drums, and vocals all through my Scarlett Focusrite. And it was, again, a bit of an arduous process. We'll get to that in a minute. We're going to take those mixes that I've done in the box, in my DAW, and we're going to take the mixdown files of that, obviously, and we're going to play them through Audacity, one after each other, right? Big, long, it's about 25 minutes. Big, long 25-minute tape, right? Big 25-minute digital track. We are going to hook up the output of the Scarlett Focusrite to the input of the Tascam Portastudio 3. We're then going to hook up the output of the Tascam to the input of the Scarlett. So I know we're getting a bit confusing here, and I'll show you visually what I mean in a second, but that's the sort of idea of the signal chain and the flow that we're going through to play the music onto the tape and then to monitor that sound coming off the tape, right? Because you don't want to monitor what's going onto the tape. You already know how that sounds, especially if it's digital, but what's coming off the tape is very, very specific, and you really, really need to pay attention to that, because tape is an analog format, as most people know, right? It's not digital, it's not ones and zeros, so what you put on it is not going to be replicated exactly every single time you play it back. That's the simplest way to put it, right? A cassette tape will also add things such as saturation and like a slight compression. It's inherent to the nature of the format, right? There's only so much information, just like digital, there's only so much information you can store onto a cassette tape. For an example, right, when you're recording digitally, if you send too much signal through, that you're sending too much information through the signal and you're clipping your signal, that will end up with a distortion on top of that signal, right? Everywhere where it's clipping, it'll be distorted, right? It's the same with cassette tape, but the distortion's a little bit different, and it can be used to your benefit or to your detriment, unlike digital distortion. Digital distortion is something you don't really want. Now, unlike digital, again, analog cassette doesn't have like a max, right? So digital has like a maximum, a max number, for lack of a better term, 100 decibels, right? Nothing can be louder than 100 decibels with digital, otherwise, again, you get that digital clipping distortion, it just gets cut right off. But with tape, it doesn't really get cut off because it doesn't work like that. There's nowhere really for the signal to go. So again, it turns into like a harmonic distortion, and it can sound good, it can sound bad. It just depends on what sort of sound you're after and what application you're using it for. Now, a good example of tape distortion used in a good sense that's actually audible and you can pick it out in a mix is the main vocal for Little Red Corvette by Prince. Now, if you listen to that, for lack of a better term, his vocal sounds very, very spiky. It sounds very, very fuzzy. It sounds like he's singing it through a fuzz pedal. He's not. What they did was, when he was obviously singing that part, was they drove the tape very, very hard. It's the same digital equivalent as clipping your signal, right? So if you're recording rap vocals today with your Scarlett, imagine you're sitting there and the thing's always in red, right? It's not a good thing. But when it comes to tape, and specifically vocals, it can be a good thing, especially with how you use it. That's one of the more prominent examples of tape distortion used on a vocal track. You can use it on plenty of other things, but it works the best on vocals. A modern day actually example of that is Adele's last album. That was all recorded onto tape, and a lot of that you can still hear that tape driven sound on her voice if you listen for it. It's a tape saturation and it has that spikiness to it, especially when it distorts. It's absolutely beautiful. So distortion when it comes to tape isn't necessarily a bad thing. You just have to understand that it behaves differently to digital. So again, what you record digitally will always be replicated exactly the same digitally because it's ones and zeros. But because this is a physical format, it actually spins and the tape moves and the magnetic particles have been arranged in a certain fashion that when it goes past the tape head, it's not always going to go past in the exact way it was recorded. So that's also why when we do play back these cassette tapes after recording the mix onto them, that we don't move them, right? All we literally do is we hit rewind. Then once it rewinds, we hit play, and it's a first generation copy after the recording. There's another thing you need to take into consideration about cassette tape. Because it's a physical format, it can degrade, and because it's rubbing up against the cassette head, there's degradation on the cassette tape every single time you play it. I know for a fact that Neil Young was talking about this in a podcast I believe he did with Rick Rubin, might have been, where they were talking about how they recorded the whole album onto 24-track cassette tape, right? But the minute they were done recording each song, they instantly transferred it to the computer so they could have the exact sound that they recorded, or the closest thing to that sound, recorded onto the tape. Because every time you play that tape, it will sound different because it degrades. It will sound different. It might lose some high end, might lose some low end, might have some flutter to it, might sound weird, right? If you record a tape and then play it months later, I'm telling you now, it will not sound the same. Tapes change. It's a physical format. Heat and temperature have a lot to do with affecting tapes. You do not want to leave tapes in a hot environment. That's a big no-no, right? You do not want to leave tapes in an extremely cold environment. That's a big no-no. You don't want to leave tapes in a wet environment. They can grow mold, all that sort of stuff. You want to leave tapes in a neutral environment that doesn't have massive temperature fluctuations so that you can get the best out of tape. This is why archiving tape is such a strenuous task. It's such an arduous task. It's very, very hard thing to do because of these factors. It's very, very similar to archiving film, right? And back in the days, a lot of the major record labels would just throw out their master tapes, right? Or just re-record over them. Like EMI, I know for a fact, with the first two Beatles records, the masters, like the mono masters that they did for those for those records, they just re-recorded over them when they needed some cassette tape for another band, right? That's how it was back then. And as time went on, they would destroy tapes. Then you started having archivists come in and all that sort of stuff and actually take that sort of thing seriously. Then in the 90s when digital came along, a lot of the stuff was being transferred onto digital and being archived that way. So this is our version of that. We're going to have a cassette tape mix, and then we're going to transfer that mix to the computer. It's going to be a first generation transfer, thus making it the highest quality transfer possible off the tape. Then we're going to take those mixes and we're going to master them digitally and have our end result. So we will have a digital master of a tape mix, essentially. It's a digital mix, but the end file has been run through tape, and then that tape has been run back through the computer, and then that file has then been digitally mastered. So we're not sending a digital master to tape and then remastering it, because then you've got a double master, right? I don't like doing things like that. For me, it's a big no-no. Like, if it's already loud, then I transfer it to tape, and then I try to master it again. I feel like that's just asking for problems that I don't really want, and I don't really want to work them out, because quite frankly, it sounds impossible to work out something like that and make it sound good. So for me, the highest fidelity way, and for you guys, is to do it like this. Mix it digitally, bounce it to tape, bounce it off tape, master it digitally. So that's what we will do, and that's what we will get stuck into now. Okay, so what we are looking at here is my Tascam Portastudio Mini 3, and I did a little bit more research. I believe it's from 1991. So I'll tell you a little bit about what you're looking at here. So what you're looking at is a 4-track cassette tape recorder. Works with your regular standard cassettes. Now, how this works is your standard cassette player that you would find in a stereo only plays 2 tracks, right? A stereo, 1 and 2, right? And that's on side A. And on side B, it's got another 2 tracks, stereo 3 and 4. What this does is it reads side B in the same direction that it reads side A. So you cannot flip this and expect it to play back side B. Oh, no, no, no. If you have track 3 and 4 up and you're playing a commercial cassette tape, then that side B will be playing backwards in conjunction with side A. It's actually somewhat of a pretty freaky effect, and I'll explain why that's so in a second. So what you're looking at here, obviously, is the Tascam. So we have our tape compartment here, which is standard for the fitment of our cassette tapes. And as you can see here, I've got a Jacketto pick right there. It's a bit of an Easter egg for you guys, and Jack, if you're watching, shout out to you. But anyway, I've got that there for a specific reason. It's to keep the tape stable, because if I don't have that there and it's just sitting there, this roller likes to wobble a little bit, and sometimes it chews the tape. So I found that having the tape elevated here stops it from wobbling whatsoever. So that is the cassette tape compartment that we are looking at right there. And up the top here is the tape counter and the reset button. For lack of a better term, that is just as like a marker. It's similar as like the beat counter on your door, except this isn't counting beats. This is counting what I like to call tape lengths. So don't consider this to be anything that is important to what actually goes on the tape. This is really just for like punching in, punching out if you're doing demos and stuff. Then down here, we obviously have the controls. We have record, we have play, rewind, fast forward, stop, and pause. Now, I like how this cassette tape player works when you're playing it, or say you're recording something. This is down to, you hit pause, these don't pop up, you can unpause and then keep going. Or you can hit pause, start rewinding, stop, but once you hit stop, it'll stay paused. Then you can hit play, it'll still be paused, and then you can be ready to go. So it's good for punching in and punching out like that. It's not too bad. So what we are looking at here now is the input section. Up the top here, we have the mic/line in jacks, which are basically just 1/4-inch jacks that either accept a microphone or they'll accept any sort of 1/4-inch sort of jack. And you'll be seeing how we utilize these in a minute. Now these run to the trim knobs here. Now this is basically like your pre-gain sort of situation where you can set the level. So you've got mic on this side and you've got line on that side. That's basically your signal. If you've got a line signal, you want it turned to here, and if you've got a microphone signal, you want it turned to here. Now, when it comes to this sort of equipment, it all depends really. Like, you could have a line signal, but it might not even come in until you switch it to mic. And it could be the complete opposite. You could have a mic and it might not work until you switch it to line. With this sort of old school equipment, it is very finicky, and who knows, there could be some crossed wires and some shit like that, but it's all dependent on the situation and your sound source as to what side you'll switch these two trim knobs to and what you'll set them to get your level. Then we reach our recording faders right here. Now, these are a bit more important because I believe this is what goes to tape. Now, if you drive these too hard, you can obviously get distortion and all that sort of stuff. Right next to them, you've got the record tracks here, and these are literally just switches. All right, it's actually pretty cool, switching them up and down and all that sort of stuff. And yeah, so there got track 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then safe. So it's got 5 positions. When you switch it to safe, even if you hit record, it's not going to record anything. So I've currently got them set to track 1 and track 2 on this side. So this is the recording bus, basically. This is where the sound goes in. This is the input section. All right. Now we come to this section here. This is the output section and also the tape monitor section. So right here we have the master fader, right? So this is the overall master. This is the loudness of all of these here, right? So every single one of these things here, these knobs right here, are separate tracks. You've got track 1, track 2, track 3, and track 4, right? This green knob here is the level or the loudness of that track, right? And this white knob here is the pan of that track, the left and the right. Up the top there is the headphones output, which is a bit of a dirty output. Like, when you listen to it, it doesn't sound the best. It honestly, it could sound a hell of a lot better, but they didn't really have the best sort of preamps at the time when it came to manufacturing these sorts of things. So in terms of that, I don't really use the headphone output as much these days as I used to when I first got this. But when you're tracking, it does have headphones that basically is that, right? So it's the master goes to the headphones, and yeah, we've got extra loudness. So we've got the track loudness here on the output of each track. You can mix with these and make sure they're all level, and then that's the overall loudness of the track, right? And that is your headphones, and this little switch here is your Dolby switch, right? It's got Dolby up there. Now, for people who don't really know, Dolby is a thing that used to come on cassette decks and all that sort of stuff that would control the amount of tape noise and tape hiss coming off a cassette. It's essentially, it's like a high shelf filter. So when you have it on, or if you've got a cassette deck with it on, it'll have a high shelf filter that will just be taking off, like, I think it's around about 18 to 16,000 hertz. And yeah, that's where the tape hiss sort of lies. So that's how Dolby sort of works. I don't necessarily use it because I prefer the sound of the tape recorded without it. And also these days, people like tape hiss. Not many people are trying to remove it from the sound of their tapes or the sound of their recorded demo tapes or anything like that. People want that sort of stuff, and now they make VSTs and tape emulators where they literally emulate tape hiss. So I don't necessarily use Dolby, and we will not be using Dolby today. So that is a rundown of the Tascam, its inputs, In the back here we've just got the power, and at the side here we've got two RCA outputs which we'll be using today to monitor the sound that's coming off this tape and then recording the sound that's coming off this tape onto the computer. So what we'll be doing now is plugging in two leads. Now I'm using two guitar leads. I feel like I'm going to have some people in the comments that might consider this blasphemy, using the guitar leads for this purpose, but I will say to you, they just work. All right, they just work. Like I don't see any issue. If it works, why bother freaking out about it? If it doesn't affect you, what's the problem, G? Anyway, so that's how we're going to run the signal onto the tape. So I've currently got these two cables connected to the output of my Scarlett Focusrite, and it's running into the input of this. I will then connect these two cables here to the output of this and run it to the input of my Scarlett, and that's how we'll get the sound back off the tape. So I'll show you the Scarlett in just a second. And so we got a bit of a handheld shot here right now. So I've currently got my Asus Tough Gaming F15 sitting on top of my Scarlett, that'll focus, on top of my Scarlett Focusrite 18i8. And as you can see, the two outputs that we have running from the Tascam are going in to the Scarlett Focusrite, the front two inputs here, and I have the gain set to exactly the same. This is how I've been transferring the tapes, and I've been recording these two inputs in stereo. So that's how I've been doing these tape transfers. The hardest part of this, and probably the biggest pain in the ass, is getting it level with these two knobs and making sure I'm having a balanced left and right. Especially with this mono track where the left and right is exactly the same, I need to make sure that these are as accurate and as level as possible. So that's the equipment that we're using, and that's where it's running to. So we will now get to transferring these tapes. Alright, so we have another handheld shot, one more. I just loaded up the Audacity program that I had preloaded all of the tracks into to run continuously one after another with a little bit of a space, maybe about 5 to 10 second space between each track. And at the beginning I have thrown in some XDR test tones. Now this is what you would have heard at the start of an XDR tape, and this would have told that certain cassette deck that that was an XDR tape, and for it to engage the XDR mode, which is similar to Dolby. It was another enhancement for a cassette, but it's also a very good indicator as to the frequency response of the tape and what kind of frequencies the tape likes and it doesn't. So that will run at the start of both the ferric type 1 and the chromium type 2 tape, so you can get an example. And I will play you an example now of what that sounds digitally. So yeah, basically that will be at the start of each cassette as like a reference. And when you do pre-recorded cassettes, it's great to have test tones at the start. So if you do need to like re-pitch something or something like that, you have a reference of what a pitch actually is on that tape. Because again, every single cassette tape deck, even professional ones, is different. They have different fluctuations to how they record, and yeah, this is just a way of fine-tuning things and making sure things are all right when you transfer the tape and you want to do things like pitch it and all that sort of stuff. So it's important to have this sort of stuff, so I thought I would put it there. But there it is, all 10 tracks. Now we're ready, literally, just to press play and transfer these tapes. We'll do that right now. Alright, now before we jump into actually transferring the digital to the tape itself, it's important to note that we shouldn't just be gung-ho about all of this and just chuck a tape in and just hit record and expect the best, because this is not like your regular sort of cassette decks, right? This is not like a consumer. You need to set the levels and make sure that they're all right. So what we will be doing is using some used cassettes to record onto and get the level right and make sure it's sounding nice. And we will be using cassettes of a similar brand. Obviously the TDK cassette is the exact same formulation as the TDK we will be using. And I've found a Sony ES260, which should be a similar to almost exactly the same formulation as the Sony UX tape that I have up here. So we will be testing and setting the level for the chrome tape using this one, and testing and setting the level of the type 1 ferric tape using this one. And then once the levels are set and we're happy with how it sounds off this tape, we will then put in this one, take it out of its wrapping, put it in there, and we will begin recording directly to it, and then obviously transferring right off the tape immediately after without moving it, so hopefully we can get the best quality possible. So we'll get to that right now. Rightio, now that the recording process is done and you've sort of seen what I was going through, again, I'm gonna have to be real with you guys. I thought that this process was going to be easier than it actually was. I didn't give the respect to the songs that I probably should have going into it, and then the respect was taken from me. If that makes any sort of sense. Playing Beatles music from start to finish, it's not an easy task. It's not an easy task at all. Hats off to the musicians in the 60s for playing their songs from start to finish, playing it the hard way. I always call it that way, because nowadays a lot of musicians, a lot of producers and all that sort of stuff, they record everything in parts. So, you might record the verse guitar and copy and paste that and copy and paste that. You might record the chorus guitar, copy and paste that, copy and paste that, or you might do it the hard way and you might record it from start to finish. It all depends on what you're going after, what kind of feel you want, what's happening in the song and what the song warrants. So the first process I described, where you record it in parts, is a bit more of a robotic sort of process. It sounds perfect. It's one of the most accurate ways to get your music sounding right. But in my eyes, you lose a bit of feel, right? Feel is like the push and pull of the track. Instruments aren't always hitting at once on the same time. They'll be hitting on time, but the kick drum might be off from the bass, if that makes any sense. The bass might be a little bit forward or a little bit behind, and the guitars might be so as well. So that's what I mean by push and pull, and the feel of the song is how each instrument relates to one another in how they were played, because they were obviously played by a human, right? Humans are not perfect, right? Machines are. If you run things through MIDI and digital and all that stuff, it's always going to be on the beat, bang, 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 on the beat. But human feel is not like that. So yeah, it was a bit of a arduous process. I obviously don't have an acoustic drum kit, so the drums have been recorded on my electric kit. And yeah, there's only so much you can do with the MIDI and all that sort of stuff. You can make it perfect, yes, But the way I've recorded everything, because it was recorded the hard way, it was recorded from start to finish, you can't really edit parts as much without affecting the rest of the beat or the rest of the track. So a lot of it is unedited. It has, yeah, a little bit of quantization on it to make it straight, but other than that, it's completely pretty much untouched in terms of my performance. The reason for that too is that I'm not a full-time drummer. You know what I mean? If I was a full-time drummer, I could probably be super 100% accurate with it, but I'm more of a bass player and a rhythm guitar player. That's where my expertise lies, and probably my best work is in my bass playing mainly, and then my rhythm guitar playing secondly. But my drum, I've always played drums all my life, so I'm able to do Ringo. It's not a problem. Ringo is not hard to do. And for a lot of drummers starting out and beginners and all that sort of stuff, I highly recommend Ringo. You know, there's nothing wrong with it. So it's fun music to play. It was fun to play on the drums. I recorded that, recorded the MIDI off the drums. And the drum sound that you're hearing is Superior Drummer 3. It's the 60s mono kit. I believe it's one of the kits that you can use stock standard when you get Superior Drummer 3. So, and I was going for that sound too. So everything now is going to be mixed in mono, pretty much the same way George Martin would have mixed these songs back in the 60s, right? There wasn't stereo. Stereo wasn't really a big thing, and it was in its infancy, and most people had mono reproducers on their record players or on their cassette decks. It wasn't stereo. So I'm mixing this the way they would have mixed it back then. I'm mixing everything in mono. So don't expect it to be, you know, like a modern take on Beatles music. No, this is meant to sound like a 1960s recording. It was meant to sound like I did it in the 60s. Hence why everything's played the hard way, everything's sung the hard way. There's no, yes, there's EQ, there's compression and all that sort of stuff, but there's no tuning, right? That's a big modern thing in music. All modern music, everyone tunes their vocals, right? Vocals are not tuned, right? These are raw vocals, right? These are raw, pretty much first and second take performances. So keep that in mind when you listen to the EP. I wanted it to have that energy, right? I wanted it to have that energy. I wanted it to have that feel. I didn't want it to feel assisted, if that makes any sense, by any sort of computer program or anything like that. Yes, it was recorded onto a computer, but it doesn't sound like that, at least to my ears anyway. And mono is a big thing as to why it does sound like that. And here's a big tip for producers out there. If you're struggling with a mix, put your mix in mono and mix in mono. If it sounds great in mono, once you put it in stereo, it's going to sound amazing. Mono really helps you level things out, right? You really can mix properly in mono because you do hear everything. It's level, it's the same speaker. Do your panning and everything in mono. Trust me. Do everything in mono, then crank it back to, you know, stereo, and you'll see the results. Trust me, you'll see the results very, very quickly, and they'll be very, very satisfying. So I recorded this all in mono. This EP is in mono. Play a couple of examples now, and yeah, we'll see what you guys think. So I will be playing examples from the Type 1 cassette tape and the Type 2 cassette tape. So we'll go Type 1 first, and then we'll go Type 2 first. And if I can get away with it, I might slip in the digital master at the end of the second example. So we'll have 3 examples: Type 1, Type 2, and digital, right? The digital will be a digital master, which is digital mix straight to a digital master. So you'll be able to hear the difference, and we'll play the same song for each example, and we might do 2 or 3 songs, see how much we can get away with in terms of YouTube's copyright and all that sort of stuff. So Yeah, here are the examples now. Here's type 1.
Buy me love, love, can't buy me love. I'll buy you diamond ring, my friend, if it makes you feel alright. I'll get you anything, my friend, if it makes you feel alright. 'Cause I don't care too much for money, money can't buy me love.
That was type 1, here's type 2. And that was type 2. Here's the digital master.
Oh yeah, tell you something. I think you'll understand when I say that something. I wanna hold your hand. I wanna hold your hand. I wanna hold your hand. Can't buy me love. Love can't buy me love. I'll buy you diamond ring, my friend, if it makes you feel alright. I'll get you anything, my friend, if it makes you feel alright. 'Cause I don't care too much for money. Money can't buy me love. So no matter when you read my book and tell me you used to lie, will you take a look? It's based on a novel by a man named Lear, and I need a job, so I wanna be a paperback writer. Paperback writer. It's a dirty story of a dirty man, and his screaming wife doesn't understand. Son is working for the Daily Mail. It's a steady job, but he wants to be a paperback writer. Paperback writer. Let me tell you how it will be. There's one for you, 19 for me. 'Cause I'm the tax man. Yeah, I'm the tax man. Standing in the dark at Southampton, trying to get to Holland or France. The man in the Mac says you gotta go back. You know they didn't even give us a chance. Christ, you know it ain't easy. We know how hard it can be. The way things are going, they're gonna crucify me.
So as you can see, there is definitely a difference between the sound of all of them. Obviously the digital master is a bit more crisper and a bit cleaner. You know what I mean? It's high fidelity. It's the highest fidelity you can possibly achieve. It's an exact replication of what I recorded. So of course it's going to sound like that. Now, keep in mind too, YouTube has compression and all that sort of stuff. It does change the sound of audio that is uploaded to it. So it's not 100% accurate. So again, I'm going to upload this EP to YouTube, but I might also make the link to listen to the actual FLAC files that I've made available down in the description, so your audio files can actually listen to the difference of all three mixes and masters. So the mixes are all the same, the masters are different. Digital, and then two analog ones that are basically both different types of cassettes, right? So you can definitely hear the difference between them. To my ears anyway, like the cassette transfers, both of them sound smoother, right? There is definitely a roll off of the harshness on the high end compared to the digital. The digital can have a harshness. I've tried to mitigate that obviously with my mixing and all that sort of stuff, but the tape seems to cut that off just enough to where it's pleasant to the ears, like properly pleasant to the ears. And the louder you crank it, the better it sort of gets for me anyway. That's not to say that the digital's not enjoyable. You know, the digital has its pros too. Obviously, it's the best sounding. Like on paper, it is the best sounding. Yes, it is the best sounding. But in terms of feel and what I was going for, the tape gives it what it needs, right? It gives it that variation, it gives it that wobble, it gives it that flux, it gives it that, again, for lack of a better term, that realness, that human error that that kind of music had back then. Now, because it's got push and it's got feel and all that sort of stuff, the tape only enhances that sort of sound and that sort of recording method. So again, like, this isn't an album, this isn't something that, you know, friggin' taken too seriously. It's, you know, these are cover songs and all that sort of stuff. So, you know, it's Beatles music too. I feel like, you know, it's better to do it justice this way than it is to overproduce it. So those are just my opinions anyway when it comes to Beatle music and all this sort of stuff and making the songs. And those were the examples. Now let's get back to it. I'd also like to just give a quick shout out to one of the real big inspirations for this video was Billy Hume on YouTube. You can look him up. I'll put the link to his YouTube channel down the bottom. He's done a lot of videos now on what it's like to record onto tape in a professional studio using a professional, I think it's 24-track cassette recorder, onto professional grade quality cassette tape and all that sort of stuff. So he's got a lot of videos talking about recording bands, recording rappers and all that sort of stuff. He's been doing that sort of stuff for God knows how long. He's older than me. He's got a lot of grey hair, so he's been doing it for quite a long time now, and I'll probably get there too. But he was a big inspiration for this video. As a matter of fact, his video that he did with what's become one of my favourite bands now, the band called the HOOPLAS, where he recorded them and they did everything onto tape. And he had a couple of other videos later showing how his cassette recorder actually worked. I shouldn't say cassette recorder, I should say tape tracker or something like that, because it's not a cassette recorder. But he was showing how that works, and there's a lot of information in there that I probably missed or didn't cover here, because it probably doesn't pertain as much to user cassettes and all that sort of stuff. That's more of a commercial setting. So if you're more interested in this type of stuff, I highly recommend checking out Billy Hume's channel. Again, he's become one of my favorite guys on YouTube. I love all of his stuff, and Billy, if you're watching this, you're the reason why I'm making this. So thank you, man, for all the great content. And yeah, I hope that I was able to teach you something too. But probably not. You probably know everything that I was talking about and probably have had to correct me about a few things. So yeah, just a shout out to Billy Hume, and also shout out to the HOOPLAS. I hear they got a new song coming out very soon, so I'm looking forward to that, boys. Keep rocking, keep killing it. And that, my friends, is the process of recording onto cassette tape. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you guys learnt something from the video. I hope you guys might get into cassette tapes and pick a couple up, and maybe pick up one of these Portastudio 3s as well. There's many generations of this very Tascam model. There's various models. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It goes up and down, and there's big ones, there's small ones. They're all 4-track. Some of them have more inputs than others. Some of them have 1, some of them have 2, some of them have 4. All depends on your budget and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, that is the process of how to record onto cassette tape, and yeah, what it is, all that sort of stuff, what you can get from it, and the format, its pros, its cons, all that sort of stuff. So yeah, guys, I hope you guys enjoyed it. The video for the full EP I'll release soon. I'll probably drop it right after this video so you can listen to the examples in full. It's a full 25-minute EP, 10 Beatles tracks. Yeah, it's all covers, so hopefully YouTube won't block it. Yeah, I've been Mickey Sticks. You guys have been awesome. Thank you guys for watching. I've got a new single coming out soon as well. I think it's on the 24th of August, called Disco Vision. So stay tuned for that. I'm sure you guys will love it. Make sure you guys go and stream So Fun. It's the last single that came out. Had a lot of fun recording that. Got a new album on the way and all that sort of stuff, been recording. And actually, I've got 2 clothing projects on the way. I've got merch getting sorted out for Alive Like a Suicide. I'm getting or should I say, alas, I'm getting CDs and all that stuff sorted for our last album and also our singles, so hopefully they can get back up on the store and you guys can buy them. Also, in the meantime, we're going to be launching a clothing brand called Somebody Famous, and I will be giving you more information about that soon. That's a project between me and 4FB Divine. We'll be running that. It's a 4FB underground production sort of thing, so I thought I'd plug that right now, so keep that in mind, Somebody Famous. And that's been it. I've been Mickey Sticks. You guys have been awesome. I've got through all my plugs and I got through everything I wanted to talk about cassettes today. So I want to thank you guys for staying this long. This has been my longest video that honestly I have ever made. It's been my most ambitious sort of video too. When I had the idea to make this in my head, it was only going to be 10 minutes, and then I came up with more ideas and it became 30 minutes, and then like however long it is now, it's probably like an hour long, who knows. But yeah, it's probably my most ambitious video. I did put a lot into preparing for this video and to make it as best as I possibly could for you guys, to teach you guys as much as possible about cassettes and all that sort of stuff. So in Genesis, this video, probably the idea came to me at the beginning, at the end of June, I'd have to say. Around about the end of June, I got this idea for this video, and I only just got finished making it now in the middle of August. So yeah, coming up with everything and getting everything sorted and making sure it was the highest quality I could make it for anyone that's watching it has been my pleasure, honestly. So yeah, if you guys could, please drop a like, a comment, subscribe. If you want to support me when the merch store's up, please go and buy some merch or something like that. Any bit of, like, you know, any bit of cash helps, I guess. So yeah guys, I hope you guys enjoyed that. Please like, share and subscribe. For the third time, I've been Mickey Sticks and you guys have been awesome. Thanks for watching, alas. I'll see you later.